Will I ever write another book in my Scandinavian thriller series? I've recently received quite a few questions like this, and the answer is complicated. Where Ravens Roost was my debut novel. It's the first book I ever wrote, and Last One Alive was its direct sequel. They were both picked up by the same publisher. It was supposed to be the first Scandinavian noir series that imprint had ever done before, and I was super excited because I had story ideas galore for these characters. Unfortunately, both for me and for readers who loved these books, the sales weren't enough for my publisher to continue with the series. So when it came time for a potential contract renewal, they asked if I had any other ideas. Did I have any standalone psychological or suspense thrillers that I could write instead of this series? And while I was obviously disappointed, I was also kind of relieved because these books came out at the beginning of the pandemic. Last One Alive was actually my pandemic book. It was the book that I wrote during the pandemic, and I had a very short turnaround writing time on it. I honestly only had about 4 months to write it. The first draft was a total disaster, and it's a miracle that it even made it to print in the first place. And it was just a really stressful time to be debuting as an author. So while I was sad because I had already started writing the third book and I had ideas for the fourth and fifth, I was also kind of ready to try my hand at something different and get a fresh start. And then my third book, Sweet Little Lies, which was a psychological thriller that has no relation to these books at all, did really well. And because of that book, a lot of readers have gone back to my back catalog and they have found this series. And since a lot of readers are now rediscovering this series, I've been getting a lot of questions about whether I would return to this series or to these characters or to this world of gritty crime thrillers. The simple answer is yes. I would love to one day return to these characters. In fact, I have a fantastic idea for a prequel book. If you read these books, there is an event that happens before the start of the first book that is constantly being referred to. It is something major that happens in the protagonist's life that has sort of changed the course of his career and changed how his colleagues and his family members perceive him. It's given him a reputation both for the good and for the bad, and that story in particular is one that I would really like to explore. And because that story essentially takes place before these books, I think that I could write it in a way that it feels like a standalone, and then I could potentially offer it to my current publisher who released these ones, or maybe to another publisher in general. As for the stories that would follow these books, I had in my mind an idea for book 3, 4, and 5. I knew the major character arcs for the main protagonists, both the male and female protagonists and the people that are in their lives. I know what would happen to them if I were able to extend the series to another 3 books, for example. But at the moment, the way that traditional publishing works, I don't really see my current imprint looking to take on books 3 to 5 in this series, unless for some reason I kind of have an explosion of sales in one of my other books. And that is one of the unfortunate sides of traditional publishing. Yes, authors do write the books that they want to write. We basically choose our stories, but there is an aspect of what will our publishers, what will our imprints accept from us, what can they sell, what can they market, what do they see a readership for, and then they look at where you sit as an author. I, for example, am a mid-list author, and they kind of judge that based on what else they have coming out, and they see whether or not it is financially feasible for them to continue with a series that didn't really perform well the first time around, or whether it's better or easier for them to ask that author to write something different that they know they can sell. That's just the business side of things. And as much as I would love to revisit these characters, and I have a lot of ideas for how I would revisit them, at the moment I'm kind of in a position where I have to write other things in order to keep myself being published. So would I ever return to these characters? Absolutely I would. I know that some people really love Kjeld and Esme, and I appreciate it every single time I get a message from somebody saying how much they love those 2 characters, but the timing right now just isn't right. But the way that publishing is, you kind of never know what's going to happen. I might wake up tomorrow and somebody way more famous than me might have read this book and said something about it on social media, and suddenly the sales go through the roof and my publisher could be interested in the series again. So you really never know what's going to happen. You just have to keep writing and hope that if you have the opportunity to come back to a series that you didn't get to finish, that opportunity becomes available to you in the future. But for those of you who do like Kjeld and Esme, the protagonists of these two books, I think you're really going to like my horror that comes out in October 2026, Eaters of the Parallax, because they're pretty similar and they are just as messed up.